She listed Kevin Spacey as her favorite guy's guy and Ashton Kutcher as her celebrity crush, which definitely didn't age well. Hi there, my name is Tessa, and when I was growing up, teenagers were all the rage. They were spending billions of dollars, every single magazine was doing a youth-focused offshoot, and some of the biggest names in Hollywood couldn't legally order a beer. There's no better example of this phenomenon than the legendary July 2003 Vanity Fair issue, It's Raining Teens, which I just so happened to own. A list of the 27 hottest teens and tweens at the time, the issue was a sort of prediction of who they thought would go on to have the most promising career. And now that it's 22 years later, the question is, how right were they? We're gonna start off where the magazine does with AJ Trout, who was 16 at the time. He talks about his upcoming movie, The Stevens Get Even, which was eventually changed to the Even Stevens movie when it was released later that year. It was actually one of the biggest Disney Channel original movies of 2003, but AJ is by no means the main character. He also talks about his band Badge, which is supposed to be his main focus now, but I don't think they ever wound up releasing anything. He was featured on the theme song for American Dragon Jake Long in 2005, which I'm not gonna lie, was a banger, but it was replaced in the second season with a cover by the Jonas Brothers, which I feel like was a signal that Disney was kind of done promoting AJ. He was in a few forgettable projects over the next few years, but honestly hasn't really done anything since 2017. The most interesting tidbit that I have for him is that at one point he was married to Leah Pipes, who I recognize from Odd Girl Out, Sorority Row, and The Originals. Ironically, when asked about his big break, he says, "I'm still waiting for it. I don't think it ever came." Next is Emily Vancamp, who was also 17. She'd been in a couple of different projects over the years, but her stint on Everwood from 2002 to 2006 was really her big break. And during her time on the show, she was actually nominated for 4 Teen Choice Awards. She didn't win any, but it's still impressive. She talks about her upcoming project, which is playing Sharon Stone's daughter in A Different Loyalty, which was really unlucky because that movie never wound up getting a theatrical release in the US. She honestly just had a lot more success in the TV space, starring in Brothers and Sisters from 2007 to 2010, which was followed up by Revenge from 2011 to 2015. And I'm guessing that that's where most people who are watching this video will recognize her from. I'm not into the MCU, so I have no idea if this is important or not, but she also had a recurring role as Sharon Carter. Her most recent movie was Miranda's Victim in 2023, which honestly has such a stacked cast, but absolutely no hype around it, that I'm wondering if it was like a weird money laundering scheme. She listed Kevin Spacey as her favorite guy's guy and Ashton Kutcher as her celebrity crush, which definitely didn't age well. Next is Britney Snow, who is also 17. She lists her big break as playing a bad girl on the long-running soap opera Guiding Light from 1998 to 2001. She followed that up with a lead role on American Dream, which I had never heard of, even though it was pretty popular. So if you're also unfamiliar, the show was set in the 1960s and centered around the Pryor family, specifically the eldest daughter Meg, who makes it onto American Bandstand as a dancer. From that point onwards, it switches between generic family drama and random historical events. And considering I really like shows like this, like Pan Am, I feel like I should give it a try. Britney was in several successful movies throughout the 2000s, like The Pacifier, John Tucker Must Die, Hairspray, and Prom Night. In 2009, she was also in the pilot episode for the Gossip Girl spinoff where she starred as Lily Vanderwoodson across from Kristen Ritter, but it never got picked up for a full series order, which is a shame because I think that it had more potential than The Carrie Diaries, which had a similar sort of prequel set in the 1980s premise. Although I already considered her a legend based on her existing filmography, she received a more permanent place in pop culture after appearing in the Pitch Perfect trilogy, one of the few times she actually got to show off her voice. At the time that this was published, Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera were in the midst of a very public feud, and Vanity Fair actually asked a couple of the kids which side they were on. Britney picked Britney, maybe out of name loyalty. Next is Aaron Meeks, who's also 17. He considers his breakout role the 2000 made-for-TV movie A Storm in Summer, and his next major role was in Soul Food in 2004, which was based on the 1997 movie of the same name. The series was a bit too mature for me, but it was critically acclaimed, and Aaron's performance actually won him 2 NAACP awards. I'm not sure why, but he wound up retiring from acting in 2007. and I wasn't really able to find any information on what he's been doing since then. Next were Ashley Olsen and Mary-Kate Olsen, who were 17. They talk about their big break on Full House in 1987 when they were less than a year old, where they wound up playing the dual role of Michelle Tanner. They were without a doubt some of the most popular kids of the 1990s and early 2000s. And they had their own line of books, music, dolls, direct-to-video movies, clothing, and cosmetics that were created by their company, Dual Star Entertainment, which was bringing in $1 billion. In fact, at 10 years old, they were even crowned the youngest self-made millionaires in American history. I think it's interesting that in the magazine, the interviewer makes a point of noting that all of the other teens seem to be in awe of Mary-Kate and Ashley, which I think is really proof that they were the shit. Even though they were usually lumped together, this interview is probably one of the first times where they were actively trying to create their own identities. Mary-Kate has deviated from their signature blonde, Ashley is wearing a pink frilly dress, and they talk about very different goals for the future. Ashley talks about SAT prep and going to college. Meanwhile, Mary-Kate is talking about their upcoming film roles, which was kind of the vibe in the next few years as well, as Mary-Kate continued to act in different projects like Beastly, The Whackness, and Weeds, long after Ashley retired from acting. I also can't get over how freaking bold Mary-Kate is, because she winds up listing Andy Roddick as her celebrity crush. Meanwhile, his literal girlfriend at the time, Mandy Moore, was standing right there. They also get asked how many Juicy Couture outfits they have, to which they respond, a lot, from 2 years ago when they were still hot. It's a sassy response, but it perfectly encapsulates who they are, because they've kind of always been on the pulse when it comes to fashion, hence why they're now in charge of the row. They're obviously still huge names in the fashion world and when it comes to 90s and 2000s nostalgia, but I wonder if their sister Elizabeth is considered more popular with the general public nowadays. Next is Evan Rachel Wood, who is 15. She actually started acting in 1993, but she didn't get her big break until her role on Once and Again in 1999. The show handled a lot of controversial issues, with her character even making history as one of the first lesbian couples on network television. As such, her pivot to more mature roles didn't really come as a surprise. At the age of 14, she was cast in 13, and I remember picking the movie up from Blockbuster and having absolutely no idea what it was about, and then being terrified of becoming a teenager. Side note, I've been seeing a lot of discourse revolving around this movie, specifically that it was inappropriate for Nikki and Evan to be playing these characters because they were so young. And I just really need people to understand that just because a movie is depicting something, it doesn't mean it's approving of it. In 2003, she was also in The Missing, and even though she's up against some acting powerhouses, she totally holds her own. And I always forget how young she actually was because she does such a great job. Since then, she's had a lot of iconic roles that I can't even begin to list, but some of them that stand out to me are Across the Universe, Westworld, and True Blood. Honestly, I feel like she needs to bring back the red hair because it was just a moment. Recently, she admitted that she actually hated doing this photo shoot because she was forced to wear something that she wasn't totally comfortable in, and it was actually one of the first instances where she realized how little agency she had as a young woman in Hollywood. And I do also wonder if some of her discomfort was because of the on-set tension. Speaking of which, next is Hilary Duff. Her big break is cited as Lizzie McGuire and Agent Cody Banks, which is such blatant Casper meets Wendy and Cadet Kelly erasure that I'm stunned. She was Disney's favorite girl for a hot minute, which isn't that surprising considering how successful the Lizzie McGuire brand was. And if they could have, they would have kept it going for 7 more seasons. Side note, does anyone else rewatch the Lizzie McGuire movie and get shocked every single time that they're reminded that she's supposed to be in middle school? What the hell was Paolo up to? I think it's interesting that they paired her up with Lindsay Lohan, considering the two of them actually had a pretty heated rivalry throughout the 2000s. They first got into a tiff over Aaron Carter, who was romantically linked to Hilary on and off from 2000 to 2004. And at one point during that time, there was some alleged overlap with Lindsay. At that age, that's enough to cause a real catfight. And the fact that they were able to keep it together long enough to do this photo shoot is a real testament to their professionalism, if you ask me.
I'm not here to talk bad about her like she talks bad about me all the time. And I just knew that it was going to happen.
I'm sorry if she felt offended, but I thought things were cool. So, Hilary, I don't want to start anything.
2003 and 2004 were huge years for Hilary, with 2 massively successful albums that I vividly remember playing on my blue Sony Walkman, and roles in Cheaper by the Dozen, A Cinderella Story, and Raise Your Voice. Although her performances received less than stellar reviews, these movies were staples for any tween girl at the time. She also launched the short-lived lifestyle brand Stuff, which really leaned into the girliness of the era, and sometime around then, she also started dating Joel Madden from Good Charlotte, who was 24 when she was 16. All I can say is, lock that man up. Throughout the 2000s, she continued starring in lighthearted comedies, including Material Girls with her sister, Haley, which was one of many riches to rags stories from that time period, like Cowbells and From Prada to Nada. In 2006, she released her With Love fragrance, which was followed up by the album Dignity, which went in a sexier, more mature direction than her previous projects. She also went brunette, which was a fun return to her international pop star persona that I loved. In 2009, she had a pretty memorable arc on Gossip Girl, but her next notable role wasn't until 2015 on Younger. Her character was actually so popular that they considered making a spinoff, but instead, Hilary opted to work on the Lizzie McGuire revival, which was unfortunately scrapped because Disney thought it was too mature. More recently, she was in the How I Met Your Mother spinoff, but it was canceled after only 2 seasons. In the magazine, she mentions that she collects Louis Vuitton bags, and I would kill for a video of her walking through her collection, because just based off of what I've seen on red carpets over the years, it's impressive. Next is Lindsay Lohan, who is 17. Her big break was in The Parent Trap in 1998, duh. And in hindsight, I genuinely feel like she should have been nominated for a Golden Globe for her performance, because she did such a good job that thousands of people literally thought that she had a twin, myself included. They also mentioned that her first job was a Jell-O commercial with Bill Cosby, and we're just gonna move on from that. Similar to Hilary, she had a great run in the early 2000s. Get a Clue, Freaky Friday, Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, Mean Girls, Herbie Fully Loaded, Just My Luck. The list goes on. She did try to go the pop star route with Speak in 2004, but I don't think the project was fully thought out since it kind of feels underbaked. Unfortunately, as she entered her 20s, her personal life began impacting her career, and she was presented as a problem child by the media. She struggled with addiction and even spent some time in prison. And eventually, all of the goodwill from her teenage years ran out. She was removed from several projects, lost brand deals, and had trouble landing roles. Recently, she's staged a bit of a comeback, but I wish that Hollywood would give her a chance on a more serious role instead of all of these shitty Netflix rom-coms. Because if you watch Georgia Rule, she can act. Next is Solange Knowles, who is 17. The magazine lists her big break as starring in Bow Wow's video for Puppy Love. But at least they do acknowledge that her first job was as a background dancer for Destiny's Child, which we all know is the real reason she was getting all of this media attention. In 2003, she released her first album, Solo Star, which performed okay, but she honestly seemed a lot more excited about her upcoming movie project, Johnson Family Vacation. But it didn't really perform all that well. Not that I'm surprised, considering how many of those sorts of family road trip type of movies were coming out at the time. She got married shortly after this issue was published and had her first child in 2004. But come on, she should have been at the club. In 2006, she was in Bring It On, All or Nothing, which I was totally obsessed with, and to this day, it's still what I think of first whenever she's mentioned. Nowadays, Solange is mostly known as a musician, having a very signature brand of soul funk, which is really unique and fun, but I personally just get a kick out of all of her fashion choices. Next is Lacey Chabert, who at 20 is our first non-teenager on this list. She talks about playing the child version of Cosette in Les Mis on Broadway, and if you've seen the animated Anastasia movie, she's the young version singing voice, but not the speaking voice, because that's Kirsten Dunst. Her big break was on Party of Five, which was before my time, but I acknowledge that it was very popular. And there is a funny moment in Not Another Teen Movie where she parodies Jennifer Love Hewitt's character in Can't Hardly Wait, and the two were actually in Party of Five together. She had several voice roles, including Eliza Thornberry, which is just iconic, and was also briefly the voice of Meg in Family Guy before dropping out and being replaced with Mila Kunis.
Oh my god, what's with Meg's voice? She sounds like someone who's about to give up a huge opportunity.
In 2003, she was in Daddy Daycare, where she served preppy office siren realness, and the following year, she was in Mean Girls, which is probably her best remembered role. And I do think it's funny that she and Lindsay were featured on this list long before they were plastics. The last projects of hers that I really remember were the Black Christmas remake and Ghosts of Girlfriends Past. And since then, she's mostly been in Hallmark movies. Over 40, actually. Whatever pays the bills, I guess. Next is Gregory Smith. I was trying to figure out why this guy looked so familiar, and then I realized it's because he's in Leap and Leprechauns, which I consider one of the most underrated kids' fantasy movies from the 1990s. The magazine lists his big break as American Outlaws and The Patriot, which I find interesting because the performance of the main characters in those are so good that he kind of fades into the background. I think the real reason that he was considered a teen heartthrob was because of his role on Everwood alongside Emily Vancamp. He didn't really make much of an impact on me personally, but a friend and I were recently talking about this, and he was actually one of her first celebrity crushes, so I guess he had that going for him. His career slowed down pretty extensively in the 2000s, and the only other major performance I can point out is a stint on Rookie Blue from 2010 to 2015. Next is Christina Milian, who is 21. Her big break was her duet with Ja Rule on Between Me and You in 2000. And that same year, she actually released her debut album. But because of 9/11, the release was delayed, and it didn't really make that much of an impact. Early in her career, she worked as a teen reporter for Disney, and also sang the Call Me, Beep Me, Kim Possible theme song, which was just iconic. She talks about her upcoming movie, Torque, which was one in a long line of Fast and Furious knockoffs like Biker Boys, Triple X, and The Transporter. This was actually followed by her first lead role in Love Don't Cost a Thing, which was a remake of the 1987 movie Can't Buy Me Love. The shot of her standing in the pool in her all-white outfit honestly changed lives. I remember seeing her in Man of the House and thinking that she was so cool, and I guess she must have just seemed like a cheerleader, because she was later cast in Bring It On, Fight to the Finish. Her last album came out in 2006, and since then it seems as though she's been prioritizing acting, although most of her recent projects have just been random Netflix rom-coms. Next is Mandy Moore, who was 19. A huge name in the 90s bubblegum pop scene, Mandy signed with Epic Records when she was 14 and released her first album in 1999. She released her second album in 2001 and made her first film appearance in The Princess Diaries as high school bully Lana. The following year, she starred in A Walk to Remember, which is one of the better Nicholas Sparks adaptations, if I do say so myself, and I remember really liking the shift from blonde to brunette. In 2004, she left her record label and starred in a string of films like Chasing Liberty, Saved, Because I Said So, and License to Wed. She returned to music in 2007 with Wild Hope, which was followed by Amanda Lee in 2009, but neither performed that well. In 2010, she had her most iconic movie role to date as Rapunzel in Tangled. And as a Disney princess, she has a permanent place in pop culture forever. She would later join the main cast of This Is Us in 2016, which was one of her best received roles, and it even got her a nomination for Best Supporting Actress at the Golden Globes. Most of her recent work has either been in music or as Rapunzel. Next is Raven. Her big break was on The Cosby Show, which she started when she was only 3 years old, and she followed that up with her recurring role on Hanging with Mr. Cooper shortly after. As if that wasn't enough, she also released her first album, Here's to New Dreams, in 1993 when she was only 7. I was barely functioning at that age, so I applaud her. By the end of the decade, she had released her second album and had appeared in Dr. Dolittle and Xenon Girl of the 21st Century, which was her first time working with Disney. This was just the start of her relationship with the company. And in the 2000s, she was the face of her own show, That's So Raven, voiced Monique on Kim Possible, and was one of the lead characters in the massively successful Cheetah Girls franchise. In 2008, she released her fourth album, starred in College Road Trip, and began voicing Iridessa in the Disney Fairies franchise. She later segued from the Disney Channel to ABC Family for the TV show State of Georgia in 2011, but the series was canceled after only one season. In 2017, she returned to Disney for the That's So Raven spinoff, Raven's Home, which followed her psychic character as an adult going through a divorce with a child who also has unexplained abilities. The series aired for 6 seasons, which is quite impressive considering the state of TV right now. Although she's not currently attached to any projects, she does have a deal with Disney-branded TV, so she definitely has something in the works. Next is Shia LaBeouf, who was 17. This choice has definitely aged poorly, but at the time, there was no denying that Shia was one of the biggest teen actors. He began starring on Even Stevens in 2000, which wound up becoming one of the network's most watched series, and in 2003, he had a critically acclaimed role in Holes.
I'm tired of this, Grandpa!
That's too damn bad!
He later had supporting roles in major movies like Charlie's Angels Full Throttle, I, Robot, and Constantine, before eventually transitioning to leading roles in The Greatest Game Ever Played. In 2007, he was an undeniable leading man, starring in Disturbia, Surf's Up, and Transformers, all of which performed quite well, which really solidified him as a box office draw.
Cody's me, bro. Let me be me.
It really seemed as though Hollywood was set on making Shia the next Tom Cruise or Matt Damon, giving him high-profile roles in Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Eagle Eye, and Wall Street Money Never Sleeps. Although he was still respected as an actor, in 2013, Shia became known for his performance art, which received mixed reviews to say the least. It was also around this time that there were reports of alcoholism and public intoxication, and his behavior actually became so difficult that he was replaced in several movies. In 2020, FKA Twigs sued him for sexual battery and assault, something that Shia's other ex, Margaret Qualley, has stated she believes. But unfortunately, the lawsuit has been delayed several times. He's still cast in the odd movie here or there, but it's definitely not the same caliber as he was receiving a decade ago. Next is Alexis Bledel, who is 21. Alexis was actually studying at NYU when she was cast as Rory in Gilmore Girls, which led to her making the decision to drop out of school at 18 to pursue acting, which was probably the right choice considering Gilmore Girls probably has the most longevity of any of the shows we've talked about so far. I mean, people still watch it every single fall. In 2002, she also starred in Tuck Everlasting, which didn't perform that well, but is now considered a cult classic. In the article, Alexis says that she's planning to return to NYU, but that never actually wound up happening, which doesn't really surprise me considering what happened in her career in the years that followed. In 2005, she was in two films that were on opposite ends of the spectrum, Sin City and Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, which brought her to the attention of two very different demographics. There was an attempt to put her in the rom-com genre, with films like I'm Reed Fish, The Good Guy, and Postgrad, but they all flopped miserably, which put into question her bankability. Most of her movie roles in the 2010s were totally unremarkable, but she did land a role on The Handmaid's Tale in 2017, which earned her critical acclaim. I really wish that she and Sarah Paxton had starred in something together because I feel like they look really similar. And I really can't get over how little she's changed since Gilmore Girls. Next is Amanda Bynes, who was 17. I remember watching Big Fat Liar and just knowing that she was going to become a star. Her big breaks are listed as The Amanda Show, as well as What a Girl Wants, which was actually one of my favorite movies from that era. She would later star in What I Like About You, which is a fun little sitcom that I think is terribly underrated, so I definitely recommend checking it out if you haven't yet. She was honestly just as big a part of my childhood as Hilary Duff and Lindsay Lohan and Raven-Symon'e. Like, just look at her filmography. Love Wrecked, She's the Man, Hairspray, Easy A, crucial teen comedies. The only real dud is Sydney White, but it's still okay. Amanda's personal life has been subject to intense scrutiny over the years, and I don't really want to contribute to that, but if you want a nice breakdown, Mila Tequila has a great video over on her channel. Right now, she's not involved in the entertainment industry, which I do think is for the best, and she does seem to be doing well. And right now, she's actually studying to be a manicurist. Next is Bow Wow. Originally Shad Gregory Moss, he began rapping under the name Kid Gangster before changing it to Little Bow Wow in 1993. In 2000, at the age of 13, he released his first album, Beware of Dog, which was followed up by Doggy Bag, and both albums were certified platinum. But would it be sacrilege to say that my favorite Bow Wow song is Baby It's You with JoJo? Although he remained focused on his music career, he ventured into the acting space in 2002 with Like Mike, which was followed by Johnson Family Vacation and Roll Bounce, which is just a really fun look at 1970s kid culture. Although he's been in a handful of movies and TV shows, Bow Wow has mostly faded from the public eye. And despite saying that he's been working on music for the last decade, nothing's really come of it. Next is Aaron Carter, who was 15. I would call him the Justin Bieber before Justin Bieber. I respect that they lead with him being the younger brother of a Backstreet Boy, and one of his first big gigs was actually opening for them in 1997 when he was 9 years old. Why not? He released his first album that year, then Aaron's Party in 2000, and Oh Aaron in 2001. I've got to be honest, I never really understood the Aaron Carter thing. I was much more of a Jesse McCartney, Jonas Brothers type of girl. Interestingly, they list the movie Feature Force as his upcoming project, but I don't think it ever went into production. And the only reference of it that I could even find kind of calls it a boy version of Xenon. He did eventually star in the direct-to-video release Pop Star in 2005, which had a very Wattpad plotline of a teen pop star befriending a nerd in order to get their grades up. In adulthood, Aaron experienced serious legal issues, and in 2019, he revealed that he had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. He's the only person on this list who's no longer with us, as on November 5th, 2022, he accidentally drowned in the bath at age 34. Next is Kyla Pratt, who was 16. In 2001, she was on the series One-on-One and also began voicing Penny on The Proud Family, a role that she would later reprise in 2022. Throughout the 2000s, she appeared in several family-friendly movies like Fat Albert and Dr. Dolittle, eventually becoming the face of the franchise once Eddie Murphy left and it switched to direct-to-video. Most of her film and TV ventures in the 2010s were unremarkable, but she had supporting roles in short-lived TV shows like Let's Stay Together and Call Me Kat. Next is Alexa Vega, who was 14, the youngest person on this list so far. Her breakout role was Carmen Cortez in Spy Kids, and I really thought that she was just the coolest girl I'd ever seen, especially in the sequels. She might have also been like one of my first on-screen experiences with like a Latino character, other than like Dora the Explorer and Dragon Tales. I know that they're still making Spy Kids movies, but are they any good anymore? After this issue, she was in Sleepover and Odd Girl Out, both of which I was obsessed with. And in 2009, she went the sitcom route for Ruby and the Rockets, which was so generic that it was canceled after 10 episodes. She incorporated music into several of her roles, to the extent that I was genuinely surprised that she never tried to release an album at some point. Alexa is now married to Carlos from Big Time Rush, which is a crossover tween me never would have expected. And they've even starred in a few cheesy rom-coms together, which I think is really sweet. Next is Daniel Radcliffe, who was 13. Although he lists BBC's David Copperfield as his big break, we all know it's Harry Potter. At the time, the franchise was one of the biggest things since sliced bread, so it isn't surprising at all to see the Golden Trio in this lineup. Between 2001 and 2011, Daniel prioritized his role in Harry Potter, but the second the series ended, he hit the ground running, starring in multiple horror, drama, and romantic movies. Regardless of how the films were received, his performances were always critically acclaimed. Like, you need to check out Swiss Army Man and Imperium if you haven't yet. I feel like he really did child stardom right. He has his millions from Harry Potter, and he just does whatever stage roles and indie movies that he wants to. Next is Emma Watson. Out of all of the Harry Potter kids, I was convinced that Emma Watson was going to become the biggest star. And for a minute there, it did seem like I was going to be right. Like her co-stars, she prioritized Harry Potter, although she did star in Ballet Shoes in 2007, which I think is a severely underrated kids movie. She was embraced by the fashion industry pretty early on, not only being the face of Burberry, but regularly being featured in editorials that made tween me unbelievably jealous. Like, some of them still live in my mind rent-free. I can also remember the hysteria when she unveiled her pixie cut, but I always thought it looked chic. After Harry Potter, she starred in The Perks of Being a Wallflower and The Bling Ring, and while not massive successes, they were a pivotal part of the early 2010s. Unlike most teen stars, she actually continued her education, going to Brown University in 2009 and graduating in 2014. This was followed up by a string of poorly received film roles. And while she definitely looked the part of Belle in the Beauty and the Beast live action, I don't really think she pulled it off. And her last major film role was in 2019 for Little Women. Nowadays, she seems to have moved away from the acting business and is focusing on her alcohol brand instead. And honestly, I don't really blame her, considering how weird the press was with her for most of her life. Next is Rupert Grint, who is the oldest of the three. Similar to the other two, Rupert prioritized Harry Potter, and in the 2010s, he had a handful of movie roles here and there. More recently, though, he's become a bit of a horror darling, starring in Servant and Knock at the Cabin, and his performances are genuinely impressive. We'll see if he continues that trajectory. Next is Milo Ventimiglia. This man was fully 26 when this issue ran, and I can't believe that they had the nerve to put him in alongside all of these teenagers. His big break was in 2001 on Gilmore Girls, where he quickly became a fan favorite, and he also dated Alexis Bledel for a few years. His upcoming project section is pretty brutal, as it talks about the Jess-focused Gilmore Girls spinoff that never took off, as well as Cursed, which was a box office bomb that took 2 full years longer to make than they expected. After those disappointments, he returned to Gilmore Girls and even had a brief stint on American Dreams before moving to Heroes in 2006. It was during that show that the 29-year-old Milo began dating 17-year-old Hayden Panettiere. I've said it once and I'll say it again. Why are so many men in Hollywood absolute creeps? For most of the late 2000s and early 2010s, he was in crappy action thrillers, but in 2016 he had a career resurgence after being cast in This Is Us alongside former teen star Mandy Moore. But the hype around him seems to have died down once again, as none of his recent movie roles have received much noise. Next is Jared Padalecki. Gilmore Girls was responsible for a good portion of this list, but I think Jared is way better known for his role on Supernatural, where he starred as Sam Winchester from 2005 until 2020. He only had a handful of movie roles during that time, and all things considered, I feel like he's pretty famous despite not actually having that many credits to his name. Last but not least is Kaley Cuoco. At the time of this article, she was best known for her lead role on the sitcom 8 Simple Rules, which ran for a total of 3 seasons. At the same time, she had a stint of voice roles in the Bratz TV show and in Brandy and Mr. Whiskers. In 2005, she was cast in the final season of Charmed, which was actually my introduction to her. Although I'll be honest, I was never a big fan of her character. I cared about the Hallowells, and that was it. She immediately followed that up with a starring role on The Big Bang Theory in 2007, which eventually ran for 12 seasons and received several spin-offs. Although I never got into it, The Big Bang Theory was without a doubt one of the biggest shows of the 2010s. And at one point, the main cast was receiving $1 million per episode. That's over $24 million a season. What a time, huh? Once The Big Bang Theory ended, Kaley started producing her own shows. I mean, why wouldn't you if you had all that cash floating around? These projects included The Flight Attendant, Based on a True Story, and Harley Quinn, all of which have been received quite well. While Kaley never made the transition from TV star to movie star, she's been booked and busy for the better part of 2 decades. And she might actually have the most impressive resume out of anyone on this list, which is really saying something. Now, Vanity Fair obviously couldn't see into the future, and I genuinely understand the logic behind some of their choices at the time. But as someone in 2025 who knows how things have shaped up, there are a few people I'd probably sub in. For one, I think that Michelle Trachtenberg's exclusion from this list is absolutely ridiculous. The Adventures of Pete and Pete, Harriet the Spy, and Inspector Gadget were all fairly successful. And when this issue was published, she had been starring as Dawn Summers in Buffy the Vampire Slayer for the last 3 years. That's perfectly respectable. Her fame just grew from there with several notable projects including Eurotrip, Ice Princess, Mysterious Skin, and Black Christmas. Not to mention her turn on Gossip Girl as Georgina Sparks. Considering she recently passed away from diabetes complications, it would have been great to see her immortalized amongst some other 2000s legends. Kirsten Dunst might have actually been too famous for this list, but she was only 21. She'd already been widely recognized as a child actress in Interview with the Vampire, Little Women, and Jumanji. But in the late 90s and early 2000s, she was absolutely running the teen scene. All I Want to Do, Dick, Bring It On, The Virgin Suicides, Drop Dead Gorgeous, Get Over It. I could keep going. And of course, there was also her role as Mary Jane in 2002's Spider-Man. So it's safe to say that she would have upped the star power of this entire photo shoot by like 100. Apart from the Harry Potter cast, this list was pretty American, which is probably why Keira Knightley wasn't considered. She would have been 18 at the time, firmly putting her in the teen category, and her career was already pretty interesting at that point. She was in The Phantom Menace, one of the biggest franchises of all time. Admittedly, she was pretending to be a different actress, but she followed that up with The Hole and Princess of Thieves. In 2002, she was in Bend It Like Beckham, which was a critical and commercial success. In 2003, her upcoming projects would have been Pirates of the Caribbean and Love Actually, and we all know how that turned out, although maybe they were concerned that she just read a bit too mature. Vanity Fair would repeat the format in 2008 with a different group of young celebrities, and since I have that issue, let me know if you'd be interested in a similar video about this list. That's it for this video, and I will see you next time. Bye!